one of them, and each one of them was really amazing and a gem. So I hope that you got a lot out of the sessions, and I hope that you did more networking and you connected with lots of people here, you connected with the workshop presenters. As I said, they are fantastic people to connect with, lots of connections, so make sure that you introduce yourselves. Did you get to look at the vendor tables and the offerings that they have? They are also fantastic businesses that can help you with your business. So please get a chance to stop by if you haven't already. And I believe that some people froze to death in the workshop rooms. It was like ice, right? So I've been told to tell you and pass on this message that they've adjusted the temperature. And the next session you might be sweating, but that's fine. But at least you won't be an icicle or a popsicle. So they are aware that the temperature went a bit crazy, so they've adjusted it. So hopefully it will be better. So wonderful, we have this amazing media panel here today. We are really so excited. These guys are from top-notch publications and radios in New Jersey, and we're just so thrilled to have them here with us. It's not every day that you can get to talk to a journalist or a person of the media and ask them direct questions and how to get in touch with them, how they can pitch, how to pitch your story, what kind of details they need. They're kind of quite elusive most of the time. So this is just such a wonderful opportunity. Let me introduce everybody. Sandra Fathi, who is the moderator of the panel. Sandra is president and founder of Effect, which is a public relations, marketing and social media agency in New York City. They specialize in technology, healthcare and professional services. She started her career as a tech reporter, and Sandra went on to work at leading technology and big PR agencies. And Sandra and her team in New York City really live and breathe this stuff every day. There's nobody that knows this stuff better than she does. They know how to pitch the media, they know how to contact the media, they know what stories they're looking for. And so, of course, we reached out to Sandra to be the moderator because she knows exactly what questions to ask these guys. So thank you so much for joining us and being here. We've got, we were supposed to have Ed Forbes, who, you look like an Ed. He is Senior Director of Breaking and Local News at NorthJersey.com and the Record, but unfortunately he couldn't join us, he just couldn't get out of his work commitments today. So we have Elise Terabio, thank you so much, I don't want to mispronounce it. And actually Elise is giving a workshop later this afternoon, so she's amazing. So she works with Ed, and she's hands-on with social media, and your actual title is Social Media and Mobile Editor at NewJersey.com. NorthJersey.com. So Elise has really got hands-on knowledge and experience with working with all the journalists in the media and how they like to be contacted. So thank you for coming so early and taking Ed's place, really. Wayne needs no introduction. Wayne Cabot. He's just so awesome to have you here from WCBS News Radio 880, CBS New York. Wayne, most of you have heard him. He wakes up in New York City every day from 5 to 10. How'd you do that? What time do you get up in the morning?
You don't want to know.
Yeah, we don't want to know. I just said I'm not a morning person, so this is not a job for me.
2:29.
2:29. Wow, every day. That's incredible.
So our hands just
So Wayne has been doing this stuff for a long time. I think since 1988, right? I mean, many years. So it's just wonderful to have somebody from radio. Radio is a strong medium, a strong channel for business owners. So we're going to talk about radio. Just love you being here and being with us today. Thank you so much. And we have Anjali Kumlani. Anjali is the Deputy Managing Editor at NJ Biz, which is New Jersey's leading online and print journal for business. So we brought Anjali here. We know her, we've met her before, she's spoken with us before, and She's got the whole business edge of print and online, very savvy on social media. She knows the buzz, she knows what's going on, and so we brought her back to our media panel because she just gave such invaluable information last time. So we're so honored to have you all here with us today. Sandra, I leave you in Sandra's capable hands. Take it away, Sandra.
Thank you. So thank you to Yasmin, of course. I need to hire her to do PR for me with those wonderful introductions. So glad to be here in Mahwah, and I was just telling Yasmin and Patty that this used to be quite a home for me. I worked in Mahwah at a local business before I started my agency 16 years ago, so it's nice to be back up on Route 17. A lot has changed. But it's wonderful to be here, and I'm excited to be here with this panel. I think that one of the most exciting things in talking to local media is some of the best stories and the best reporting come out of local media. And often when the clients who come to us, they dream of being in the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or these major national publications, but their customers are often local. And I think many of your customers are often local, and they're reading these papers and listening to these radio shows, and these are trusted journalists that have tremendous impact and sway with the customers. So these are the folks you definitely want to be talking to and focused on. And the wonderful thing about it is they have an interest in those local stories as well, and in engaging with the community. So let's hear more from our panel. And since today is all about social media and communications, I'd love to start with hearing how social media has changed your job over the years. And I'll start with Wayne, because I think you may have a little more experience. Well, I did read in your bio, I think it's 40 years in broadcast?
I started in 1980, so close enough.
Oh my goodness.
I started at a little radio station back in New Jersey. You're all familiar with New Jersey, you know what that is? Out in Warren County, little daytime radio station, which means it signed on when the sun came up, it signed off when the sun went down, to protect the station in Canada on the same frequency. Those stations still exist, believe it or not.
Wow.
And this is before, obviously, computers or cell phones or anything, where we relied on pitches via U.S. mail. We'd get a little, letter opener, and we'd go through all these letters, and you know what? It was effective. It worked. And so all these years later, everything has changed, and yet it's all the same in that we just want an interesting story to tell. And on the radio, what's great about it is when you're in your car or in your shower, it's very personal and private, and it's really one-to-one and intimate in a way that nothing else is. I mean, the pictures on television are fantastic, but they're a distraction. You're being shown and sent images, whereas the images in your mind are much more vivid. And that, I think, is one of the great things about radio, is the connection.
And Anjali, what about you? How has it changed either how you report or how you publish even your publication?
Sure. So I actually want to say that even though I am a younger person, I feel the same way you do about this topic. I came of age in the digital and social media sphere. I remember when Facebook launched. I remember when Twitter launched. I was growing up at that time in college, so it wasn't like I was really young in using it. I was using it at a time where people were still trying to figure out what exactly it was. And so it went from me experiencing it as a way to communicate with just friends or just with family to learning how to use it as a tool at the same time that everyone else was. And so I think that there's something to be said about how effective it is when you have things like pitches through the mail coming in. I still get that. I still rely on having actual conversations on the phone or an email versus the 24-hour sort of non-stop inbox from Twitter. So I think it's interesting to see just how it's developed from trying to find good sources and good pitches. And it's not necessarily that you have to rely on public relations as well, because there are people who are even like in-house for companies. There'll be people who are paid to pitch to me, and they still don't know how to pitch to me. They don't know what my angle is. And they're like, oh, this is a great story. I'm like, that's great, but it's not a business story. Why are you pitching it to me? And so to get lost in that constant barrage of information, it's very hard, and that's why we're elusive, by the way. We're just all over. So it's just very busy now compared to a time where I guess it would be a lot simpler to handle pitches.
Perfect, thank you. And Elise, your title wouldn't exist were it not for social media.
Gave me a job, so I'm cool with it. No, it's such a big part of the landscape, the media landscape, and it's like you guys were saying, the way to reach us, it's not just sending us a letter or calling us on the phone. We get pitches on DM on Instagram of a new business that's opened and wants us to check it out. I mean, I used to write for the Better Living department, and that's how we started getting pitches. We would get private messages on Facebook. We would get private messages on Instagram. We would get tagged on Twitter telling us about a grand opening. So there are different ways to reach us, but it's just that's where people are having conversations. And that's where they're sharing and tagging their friends and about new places they're hearing about. So that's where I have my ear to the ground, and that's something I always am happy to pass along to my colleagues. But that's kind of where you have to be in addition to trying to reach out to media organizations via the traditional mediums.
So I'm going to assume that most everyone here has some engagement in social media, either on Facebook, watching the grandkids on Facebook, posting your own kids on Facebook, or spying on your kids on Facebook if you have a 16-year-old like me. Tell me a little bit about how do you look at different channels differently from a business perspective? Do you keep a separate online identity kind of from your business persona or from your workplace? And do people sometimes invade either one? Maybe I'll start with you, Elise.
I get that question a lot from our reporters who ask me if they should have a private Facebook or professional Facebook or, different kinds of pages. And it really depends on the person and what their preferences are. The easiest thing I would say, you can have your Facebook, but really just assume that anybody can look at it unless you have, your privacy settings, which have become really easy to adjust. So any individual post that you put up there, you have the ability to say, okay, the public can see it, or just my family, or just colleagues, or, whomever. So there are ways to get around that without having to create different personalities for yourself online, but you certainly should be able to. I mean, if you are a beat reporter and you want to have a page on Facebook that's just about, if you're an environmental reporter and you have just a Facebook page for that, then on that page you can use it to connect with anybody from the environment industry, and you wouldn't have to interfere with them looking at your family pictures. Or on the other hand, you don't want to have to be sharing your stories every single day with your friends and family. I mean, at a certain point they might get sick of it, right? So maybe in that way you want to have a separate presence online where you can just be professional and talk about your beat versus being open to everyone all the time.
Wayne, what about for you? Do you have separate or?
I'm taking mental notes on what you just said. That's a good
Come to
idea.
my workshop, 3 o'clock.
Yes. Yeah. I don't have separate accounts. There are times I wish I did. What I've done is anything I put on Facebook would be okay for my kids or my mom to see. So anybody who wants to look at it, there's nothing interesting there, trust me. And on Twitter, it is, I use that not strictly, but almost strictly as a news source and for putting out things that I'm doing or the station is doing. So, no, I don't keep them separate, but I don't put a whole lot of personal stuff up anyway because I'm with you. At some point, people don't care anymore.
How do you feel about, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, today you have to assume that there's, you can't put, really extreme stuff online because somebody's going to find it. So you can't just willy-nilly be posting the craziest thing you've ever done on Facebook.
There are a lot of people you need to be telling that to.
Yeah.
I don't think they're in this room. I see a lot of that in my Facebook feed.
And I keep politics out of it, of course.
Yeah. Wayne, but in terms of folks pitching you on social media, how do you feel about it? Do you have a preference for it? Or is your inbox the preferable door?
The inbox has traditionally, when I say traditionally, in the last 15 years, been the way to do it. But I also have established relationships with perfect strangers who have, who are following me on Twitter, who are engaging, who are replying, who I may then follow if I find them interesting, or if I find them dedicated and they listen all the time, and the least you can do is, follow back. And then you establish a relationship and a trust, and maybe they'll tip me off to something, and because I recognize the name, I'll look into it. But it seems kind of tenuous that way, but I think that's going to develop over time.
What about for you, Anjali?
I think at the end of the day, everyone has to remember that behind the Twitter account, behind the Instagram account is a person who's working and doing everything just like you are. And so I do actually keep separate profiles. I do have a separate Facebook account for my personal life and then a public Facebook account and page so that people can find me and tag me and engage with me that way. Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat, I engage mostly on a business level. I don't think I really use it too personally. And I think that when people are looking for these kinds of accounts, right, there's two themes that you kind of look for. One is a personality to follow, and the second is a theme to follow. So if you're trying to follow someone who's has a certain beat or covers your specific topic, that's one type of area to look at, and the other is the personality. So it's not necessarily geared to one specific issue, and so that's how you can kind of like separate, how you project yourself. Are you the person who's going to specifically, strictly only have this information to throw out there, and that's how you get followers that way? Or are you going to be a personality that, people actually enjoy following and aren't going to be like, oh, they're tweeting again or they're posting again? So, and what was the other question?
I actually did want to ask you also, Anjali, so you talked about the topics or trends that you cover, and I know you cover a lot of healthcare, diversity issues, women's issues. Can you tell us a little bit about how you find those stories, or what kinds of stories this audience might pitch to you that are relevant for your beat?
Absolutely. And the way that I'm going to say this is going to sound mean, but I promise it's not. It's really nice when businesses engage with the community and when you have an event to support something. But if every single one of you tried to make NJBiz cover every single one of those events, I would have time for nothing else. So events less, and more maybe projects or different kinds of engagement. So because I cover healthcare, for example, like a hospital opens up a support group and is funneling X amount of money into it. Anything with numbers and money we love. So keep that in mind. So if you're trying to pitch us, make sure that you're willing to talk about money. But if you look at any kind of project, like I said, or any kind of something new or some new idea that's coming out or a trend, like those are things that typically news will pick up on, no matter what kind of publication or organization it is. So that's something to keep in mind. Is not as much as I would love to showcase how warm and fuzzy everyone feels sometimes, I can't do that.
You need those numbers and data and
right.
the financials to back it up.
Because something like an event is easy for a person or an organization themselves to send out into the universe of the world, and we could pick it up, or I could personally pick it up and retweet it and share it and be like, oh, look at this. It can't get more involved than that.
Do you ever find stories through your Twitter feed or Facebook feed or trending topics?
That is how I find them. So I think we're at the point in the news world where we're literally obsessed. I think I wake up in the morning in a panic, like wondering what I've missed in the world while I was sleeping. But a lot of the times I do find it on Facebook and Twitter and even Instagram, just looking at what people are posting, and then I'll notice a trend of sorts, or I'll notice like a very unique idea, or someone's talking about something that will suddenly trigger an idea. So that's really good. Email pitches are also really good. Phone, absolutely not. I need some way to document it visibly. So if it's a phone call, I won't remember it 10 minutes later. So there has to be some sort of like visible documentation of what it is we're talking about.
Thank you. And Wayne, you mentioned on your 3 a.m. drives that you listen to the radio yourself to get a lot of news stories. What are some of the other sources that you use?
Well, aside from stealing from other radio stations on the way in that I'm listening to, I steal from NorthJersey.com, I steal from NJ, but everything is fair game. So I am looking at Twitter to see what everybody is posting. I'm certainly looking at, in my job, and everybody's job is probably the same. There are aggregators that put together all sorts of different stories that relate to what you want to do. In my case, it's the news business. So one will compile a lot of the stories out of Washington, and there's certainly no shortage there. One will compile a lot of the stories in the New York, New Jersey area, and one is from, I'm drawing a blank here, but it's the New Jersey Politico NJ. We'll have all the Jersey stories. I'm finding it's very helpful, and I can scan and hone in on what I want to steal and put on the air, and then make my own by making my phone calls, getting them on the air, and maybe getting a different take on it. Twitter is huge, absolutely. I mean, it's too bad they call it Twitter because it sounds so trivial and insignificant and such a goofy name. And I know that a lot of people, even my contemporaries, and I'm 53, and that's pretty young, isn't it?
The
That's
president
very
seems
young.
to like it, so.
People think it's like, what is this foolishness? But really, it's become a news source. To me, it has replaced the news wire, where we used to go to the AP wire, or even the old days, UPI and Reuters still around. But really, as the news wires have diminished, Twitter has replaced them, in my estimation. And it's a news feed. It's a constant churning of reliable sources, sketchy sources, but you know what you can trust. If you see it's, a reputable news organization, then you can put some stock in it and follow up and report on it with attribution.
And Elise, you're a little bit on the other side of this, because in Elise's role, and you can talk more about it, she is taking the content and working with the reporters to expand their audiences on social media. So maybe tell us a little bit about how, when reporters are working with you or the editors are working with you, how do you view social as part of that delivery mechanism and engagement?
So for such a long time, social media came at the end of a project or at the end of a story. So, the reporter would do the story, they would run it past their editor, it would be published online, and then they would say, so what can you do to make this go viral? And I'm like, where were you 3 days ago? So really, it should be something you're thinking about at the very beginning. So what are some things you could do at the early stages of your reporting to make sure that it's going to be a social success? So think about what audience you're targeting and why they should care about this. What emotional reaction are they going to have to this story? What's the headline they're going to see so that they stop in their tracks? I mean, on your social feed, they're competing with, on Facebook, cute dog pictures, your family vacation photos, the memes. So you have to find a way to put these stories out there in a way that's interesting. That's something that's going to make them stop in their tracks. So for us, social media has become more of a focus, like to be part of the entire process, not something that comes at the very end. And that's especially for big investigative stories that I know that people on our team put so much work into, only to have it fall flat because it wasn't presented in the right way on social media.
So what can this audience do to set their stories up for success from a social standpoint? Are there certain types of multimedia that they need to share? Is it video? Is it images? Or what helps bolster the reporting with content from the communicators or the entrepreneur?
I would say know the reporters in the town that you're in, so you know that person to reach out to immediately, so you don't have to call the main desk and that person transfer you to another desk. So you may never find the person you're looking for to cover the event or topic that you want. So know who the reporter is and reach out to them on Twitter so that they're aware of you and you're aware of them. I would also say that if you are in communication, to have that multimedia stuff ready, because if it's something that we want to put up a quick brief about, I mean, it'd be really great to have a photo that's high res and ready to go, or a quick teaser, or a hashtag that you're using, so we don't have to go out of our way to do that work, because we're doing a lot more with a lot fewer people at this point, and that's across the industry.
Yes.
So any help we can get for those kinds of stories would be really great.
And Wayne, radio is a little bit different. We talked about it earlier, that there are multiple people in the organization that you might pitch, not just the host of the show. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, and then same thing here. Our ranks are dwindling too because of the economization, if that's a word. Thank you. But we still have a newsroom with writers and producers and managers and reporters and what we call ourselves air talent. Only we call ourselves talent. Nobody else does. And so yeah, there's any number of people that you could pitch. The thing is, we're more visible, so people might know the reporters or the anchors and reach out that way. But once you establish a relationship, then the producers would be a good connection to make. But it's kind of hard. If you were to pitch to my station, for example, I would say Twitter is the way, through me or a reporter, or if you already have connections. And if you make it personal and connect and reach out, people will more often than not get back to you.
And I would also add, just I forgot from before, is that what's the local angle to whatever it is that you're pitching? Because again, like Wayne's saying, we get so many pitches. You know, again, when I was in Better Living, I had a press release inbox, and it was just always, I could never get it down to zero, because there's so much coming in. And the way to really get through is to tell us what the local angle is. Is there someone involved with the organization that, you know, is from the area? Is there an impact that it's going to have in the area? If it's a product, you know, is it something that's going crazy and trending in our area? Are there places around that sell it? Is it, you know, a locally owned business? Tell us what is local about it, so that people who are in our area and our readership care more about it.
Thank
Stay
you.
local.
And Angeli, I was just noticing, and if you haven't seen a copy of New Jersey Biz, there are some copies outside, and so impressive and great to see a thriving print publication as well as your online presence. But I did notice you're, you know, profiling business owners, even small business owners, and you've done great in-depth pieces on their entrepreneurial journey and the business itself. What does it take to be that cover story? What do you look for?
Oh, I think we're getting to like secret sauce territory.
We won't tell anyone.
Oh, okay, yeah, I trust that. Everyone's tweeting right now. No, I'm kidding. The unfortunate answer to that is it's an editorial decision. There are so many different factors, and this goes back to know how to pitch this story. Know who your target publication is, because if you're trying to get on air, that's going to be an entirely different pitch than you pitching to North Jersey and you pitching to NJ Biz. So NJ Biz definitely is concerned more with what's new, what's unique, what's working. There are a lot of pitches that we get where it's like, oh yeah, we just started, and it's like, oh, that's great. But what have you done anything yet? Like, can you show us that what you're doing is working right now? Because we can't be your ad service. We're not a free ad service. And so I think that gets confused a lot, because people just assume as a business publication that we're just going to be doing nice stories all the time, when it's not. We actually do break news. We do have scoops and exclusives. We do a lot of that stuff too. So to really be able to pitch that story, that you know that it's an area that's maybe hot or becoming hot, or it's a company that's doing really well, local, or is based locally and doing bigger things. We've had companies that will start out in New Jersey and then suddenly they're in like 3-4 states. And so that's impressive within a year. How did you do that? What were you doing? What were you doing right to grow your business that everyone else would want to follow? Because you have to remember, our audience is you. It's your colleagues. It's your peers. It's everyone who's doing exactly what you're doing. So you want to hear from them, how did they do it? How did they do it right?
And Wayne, we talked a little bit earlier about the difference between television and radio in terms of broadcast media. And if someone is fortunate enough to pique your interest with their tweet and secure an opportunity on your show, what makes a great radio guest?
Well, what I would do, I think what makes a great radio guest is to have a great radio moment or a series of moments. And that is essentially just having a conversation. It has to sound real. It can't sound scripted where, you know, question, answer, which puts you to sleep. It has to be an interaction. So if you do have the opportunity to come on the air with me or someone else, if we tape it or we go live, the temptation is going to be, on the part of the person who's being interviewed to get all the information out in one blurt and one long sentence, and it becomes a monologue. And that's going to end the conversation real fast. You want it to be a two-way. You want to have the opportunity to be personal, to be fun. Everybody wants to have fun. Everybody wants our lives are so full of heavy and distracting things that if you can engage someone and make that connection, that's the key. So short answers, be personal, be lighthearted, don't be so damn serious. And I think that connects with people. Don't be afraid to be human. The thing that stands out most is never a good, solid, flawless interview. It's when something goes wrong. And I use the word wrong. Wrong can be right. It's these personal moments that we share. Because we all have things that go wrong, and we can all relate, and we can be empathetic, and you make a human connection that way. So be yourself and be real.
And Angela, I'm sorry, you want to add?
I was just going to say, I think that's the key point in all of this, is because we're at a point now where there's so much content out in the world, and so you don't want to be talked to, you want to be able to relate to something. So that's like a really important point on how to.
And Angela talked a lot about needing facts and figures and numbers and the business side, but Wayne, you also do a lot of human interest stories. You mentioned a story you did on a young man from Pennsylvania who won an investing contest.
Yeah, just this morning, right before I came here, at 9 o'clock, there was a kid who's been down on Wall Street since yesterday. He'll be there today and again tomorrow. And he won some investing contest, where they give you imaginary $100,000 to invest. And thousands of kids across the country all make their investments, and you see who comes out best. And this was this kid, 17 years old. And I've known from interviewing kids, anybody who's tried to interview a kid or have a conversation with your kid's friends, it doesn't always go that well. So I'm like, okay, this one we're not going to do live. That has the makings of a train wreck. So I taped it. And it's a good thing I did, because he was nervous, of course, and smart and very bookish and not dynamic at all. But I loosened him up and had some fun with him. And through a little bit of editing, we took 4 minutes, 5-minute conversation, made it a 2-minute radio conversation, and it was a lot of fun. It was good. But kids, I think what won us over on that pitch was because the kid was 17 years old. If you had told me that some 52-year-old guy just made 10% return, you'd be like, okay, good for him. But you tell me it's a kid, okay, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
I'd say kids. I'd say old people. I want to know how the woman at the nursing home who's 110 years old got to be 110 years old. Does she drink whiskey? How much does she smoke?
I hope so.
I want to know all this stuff. Or pets, of course. I mean, it goes to common. All these things break through and make us go, and it's that intimate, emotional connection.
That's something that I've been focusing on recently, because the phrase we say, and it sounds kind of silly, but mobile is social, and social is Facebook, and Facebook is shares. And what are you sharing? Why are you sharing it? And it's what's going to surprise you about the story, about the person you're interviewing, about the business. What's going to elicit that response where, wow, I have to tag my mom in this. I have to tell my boyfriend about this, So that's, the key ingredient in a story that's going to let people, make them want to share it and pass it on to their own network of friends and family.
Absolutely. And I think, Wayne, you said something really interesting. This was a 2-minute story. That's not a lot of time. So back to your comment about people speaking in sound bites and not necessarily being long-winded, if you're only going to get 2 minutes on the radio with Wayne, you better be quick about your message or your story. But at the same time, you also have 5 hours to fill. We talked about it a lot. So I think people forget that there's so much opportunity in radio, which is wonderful. And I think the print publications are feeling the hurt a little bit more in terms of constraints of space, but now with online, you have so many more opportunities. Elise, tell us a little more about the work that you're doing also with reporters to build their own brands and presence online.
So we developed a new team, and the one that I'm on is called the New Audiences and Lifestyles team. And Basically, the goal here is to take our reporters, especially the ones where we know that they have a big following, and to see how we can expand that. So we have our loyal readers, we have our loyal followers. We want to see who we haven't been tapping, and why that is, and what we can do to change that. So one thing we're doing is one by one taking the reporters and seeing how we can build their brand. And to them, building their brand sounds kind of funny. Like they're not used to talking about themselves or promoting themselves. It's always about promoting the stories. But really, that's how you're going to get the stories, by putting yourself out there and connecting with people across different networks. So that's been one of the focuses of our team. And even by starting by building social media profiles, which some people have just been ignoring. And that's fine, and it has been fine for years, but that's not really what's working right now. So we want to make sure that they are where everybody else is. So, if you want to build your audience and you're a reporter in Hackensack, well, you better be following a ton of Hackensack businesses and politicians and stakeholders to make sure that you're listening to what everybody's saying, and then that you're the person that they find when they have something to share.
And they're looking at who likes and retweets and shares their
Yeah.
content as well, right?
Yeah, sometimes there's some days where it's like it feels just like it's a circle where we're all just retweeting each other's stuff. It's nobody outside the newspaper, so it feels kind of like a void of retweets. But there are some moments where if a story resonates enough with people, it goes crazy. So it's important to be out there, because if you're not, then you don't have the chance to expand.
That's
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, so many people in my business, we're a room full of mostly old white men, and a lot of them have never had to put themselves out there and make themselves a brand, and you're absolutely right. And what I would say to people who haven't started yet and who think, I'm going to look like a moron, I'm going to have 4 Twitter followers. And yeah, you see that, and like, oh, this guy, I didn't know he was on Twitter. Oh, they have 4 followers. They just started. That's not a bad thing. That's, hey, good for you. You're jumping into the game. You're paying attention. You're seeing what needs to be done. You're a little bit late to it, but so what? Welcome to the world. So don't feel bad about not having a big following. Right? Would you agree?
I would agree, and I would also add that I think I mentioned this before, but you have to be easy to find, because if you're a business that, I want to get in touch with, and I can't find your Twitter page, I can't find your website, I can't maybe find your phone number, then I'm going to just go find somebody else. If you're not there, how are we going to find you?
That's such an important point. Earlier, Patty mentioned how are they going to find you in Google, and for most people don't realize that their social media profiles will rank higher than their business website or content that they intentionally create and own. So if you Google someone, their Facebook page, the LinkedIn page, the Twitter handle will probably come up before their business. So if they're not there, they're missing out.
And if I'm on Twitter, we have a story that I want to tag you in, I want to just be able to search for your Twitter handle and find it immediately. I don't want to have to grab your business name and then paste it into Google and then find your website and then find the page with the contact info for your Twitter. It should just be easy to find and be in my face.
So I do want to give the audience a chance to ask questions, so I'll ask one more, but before I do, so you can think hard about your questions. But is there a particular story that you worked on that you think was really influenced by social media, whether it went viral or it came to you through social? Is there an example that you could potentially share with us?
I rely on social media more than ever for the other beats. So for healthcare, it's a little bit easier to kind of have the same contacts in the field. But when it comes to the diversity coverage that I have, that's where it's most important, because I feel like it's still an establishing sector. And so when you have thought leaders in that space, or when you have businesses that are focused on that, they don't necessarily have a PR machine, or they don't necessarily have the capacity or the resources to reach most news organizations. And so that is where I have oddly developed an actual network. Like there are people who anything related to anything of a specific community,
almost immediately gets retweeted as soon as it's put up because you've developed that online relationship and communication, and it works both ways. They start retweeting stuff and tagging me, and suddenly I have like 15 notifications about something, and I was like, oh, what's going on here in the world? And so that's where I rely on that, because something like that can get lost in an inbox, especially because we recently switched servers, so I'm completely lost in my inbox right now. If anyone's emailed me, I apologize. But so I think that's one example.
How about for you, Wayne? Any particular stories stand
I
out?
think the one thing that I've put on Twitter that's gotten the most reaction, it involved a group with a rabid fan base, and that is the WWE. I interviewed Michael Cole, who is the ringleader, if you will, the announcer, and he used to be a reporter at our radio station. And we had him on the air just for fun, catch up. Oh my God, it's a year and a half later, and I'm still seeing that being retweeted a year and a half later.
Wow.
If you can tap into something with a really engaged, and as I said, rabid fan base, like wrestling, or anything along those lines, yeah, it'll just keep building on itself, and people will discover it months and months later.
I would say on a more serious note, and over the winter we had, let me think, I want to get the dates right. Over the last year or so, there's been some reporting on transgender youth in North Jersey, and we had a couple of reporters who did a series of stories on that topic. And there was one story last fall about a young Cub Scout who was kicked out because he was transgender. And the reporting on that's one of the first examples of where I sat down with the team, and from the beginning we kind of hashed out a plan to put out this story on social media. And the effects were, you can see them. We put the story out and we knew exactly which parties, which groups, which organizations to tag and contact. The reporter was responsible for any sources he talked to from the national organizations to pass the story back to so they could share. And that story is something that was picked up by a bunch of outlets, and they actually changed the policy on allowing transgender youth in Cub Scouts. So that, I feel to me, made a really big impact. Because I'm not going to take complete. We're not taking complete responsibility for it. But I think having this plan and executing it in a way that we know we're reaching as many people as possible really made a difference, and it just shows that it's worth it. It's worth the work.
Fantastic, thank you. What an inspiring example. I think we
More
do have a
inspiring than
question.
wrestling?
It's a toss-up.
I've got a son who's a fan. I do. I think we had some questions in the audience. Would you mind standing and just saying your name and share your question? Oh, wow. Welcome. Come to the MAWA Social Media Day conference. No.
One word, I need 140 characters.
This is going to sound so trite, but it's so true. Passion.
Precision, I guess, would be the one that I would say. You have to be really precise about your message.
I would just say listen. Listen to the communities. Active listening plays a big part in what you do online and on the online community.
Thank you. Any other questions? We've got one in the back, gentlemen. Woohoo!
It's interesting. We're trying to figure that out as we go. We really are. We were doing a lot of Facebook Live streams, a lot of Facebook videos, and then we realized after a while that the people who are watching and engaging are the same people. Nothing wrong with super serving your audience, but we really weren't getting beyond that. We really weren't expanding beyond that core group. So we're reevaluating. Now we're doing things like YouTube, short YouTube video, putting out short Facebook videos, or YouTube, or Twitter, just to try to get attention. We're really just, honestly, we're figuring it out. hopefully we'll figure it out.
Have either of you, Elise or experimented with that?
I talk about this a lot, actually. So the idea of figuring out the audience and how to use live anything, whether it's Periscope or Facebook Live or whatever kind of live streaming concept there is out there, as well as even clips like through Snapchat. I think that part of the newsroom struggle is, first of all, manpower. You have to have someone like yourself to take over all operations, or have a team to specifically do that, because one person can't be actively listening for a report and taking videos and live tweeting. It's insane. So I think reserving it for special events or really important events has been sort of the way to do it. So for example, the one time that I think the first time I used Periscope in the recent past was when Trump came to Edison, way back when, now it seems. But that was the first time that I'd used it for a really lengthy amount of time. Before that, I'd had experience at like rallies and protests. That's always really good to use it for. When I was doing the breaking news beat, anytime you were at an accident scene, or so there's like different ways to utilize it, and I think that it's a lot harder to do it for a ribbon cutting per se.
Yeah. The way we use it is all about access. So what are you giving the followers that they can't just read in a story that you have online? And so we try to do a lot of behind the scenes, some places that an average reader can't get to. If there's a breaking news conference, we want to have the reporter there doing a Facebook Live. If we had a local high school did a simulation of a car accident to warn against drunk driving, so the reporter was right on the field, like where the car was happening, and people were like tuning in and going crazy. Is this real? And we said, of course not. We wouldn't just put a car accident on Facebook Live. But given that sort of access, we've had after a breaking news story, we've had a couple of reporters sit at a table and just talk about everything they know, everything they've been talking about with local officials to give people the latest. So access. Breaking news updates are good for Facebook Live, but there are some rules to it. You have to use it in the right way, so make sure your staff is trained on it, so you're not like showing people up your nose, or making sure the video doesn't cut off and you're holding it the right angle. So that, I think, is a big part of it, because people aren't going to watch something that's shaky or not really going anywhere. So the training is first, and the resources, and then knowing what to cover on Facebook Live that makes sense.
One of the things that I think we didn't comment on is comments. Because now that you are so engaged in social media, how does that impact you at all in the newsroom, if at all? Do you read those comments? Do they influence the next story? Do you respond? Do you get despondent and cry like celebrities do when they get the negative comments?
Keeps me on my toes, I'll tell you that, in a very good way. I mean, I've had a lot of listeners who've heard things on the air and contacted me, typically Twitter, sometimes Facebook, sometimes emails, who say, hey, you said this, but consider this. I'll be like, good point. Or sometimes I'll disagree. But it makes me do a better job and makes me, I think, be more thorough when I realize that everything that's out there can be instantly heard, critiqued, shaped. So yeah, absolutely, I read all those comments.
Angela?
I agree with that. I think that it's funny because in most newsrooms you'll hear people say, don't read the comment section. It's just where the trolls are. But you learn quickly that there are people who will make valid points, and when they call you out on Twitter, when they call you out on social media, I personally feel the good mark of a good reporter is to then amplify that. If someone is critiquing you and they're right, you can't just ignore them. You should absolutely amplify their voice because they just corrected you. And so that's one of the interesting, and it's a really humbling experience, I have to say, being out there all the time on social media.
I would say a big part of my job is looking at the comments, which sounds really depressing, but there are situations where it does help. But I mean, thankfully Facebook has its filters now, so the really ugly stuff I don't see. But there are some times where we do respond, and I think it tells them that it's not just a robot posting all these things on Twitter or on Facebook. It's somebody who's sitting behind a desk reading your comments, and then they're like, oh, this person has a sense of humor. Oh, they have a personality. Maybe I shouldn't be calling them, you know, the devil, fake news, whatever. So, I mean, it's funny how as soon as you reply, they kind of pull it back, and you're like, oops, I didn't know they were going to actually read it. So sometimes it just diffuses the whole situation. And also being the first comment on certain stories, especially the really controversial ones, sets the tone because they know that there's somebody paying attention and listening. So maybe don't put out the crazy comments. Helps reel it in a little bit.
Do we have time for one or two more
we,
questions?
yeah, maybe one short question if you can. Just do it really short.
Front table?
Hi, Tom Walker, Crowd Media. What's your point of view on reframing the same content to different platforms?
I think it's a must. Yeah.
How do you go about doing that, I guess?
I think the voice is important for different platforms. Twitter, you only have so many characters to work with, so you really want to get the information out as soon as possible. Facebook, you can be more casual and speak to your followers as if they're your friends, so you don't have to be so official. When it comes to news, it's hard to do that because you want to say, you know, a 32-year-old man was struck by a car on the main street, and you don't want to get to the emotion part of that. So be casual, be easy to understand and easy to digest. I think all across the board you want to have visuals because I think on Twitter you're 3 times as likely to look at a tweet if it has an image. If it's just a link, you might just scroll past it. So I think across the board, visuals is something you need to have because you need to, that's what people are going to stop and look at first.
Even if it's not images, because some stories don't lend themselves to that, a really good quote, a really strong quote, or a really strong idea from the story, if you use that, it's typically better.
You would use that like as a photo?
And yeah, like or even just by itself, because I know some people tend to just retweet links, and that does nothing for anybody. So if you have like a quote to, you know, like a quote tweet, and then,
Or even something on Photoshop or on Paint, take that good quote, put it in block letters so that people can stop and see it and say, whoa, what was that about? And they can then just read the story. So even without an image, that works. Same thing with like a statistic or a graphic, or that works.
Are we all out of time? The hook is coming?
I know,
Okay.
unfortunately we are. We could have gone on for another hour. Seriously, this is
I
like...
just want to thank everyone because this has been such a treat
Yeah.
for me also. So a big round of applause to everyone. And I'm also going to personally apologize at the number of tweets and inbox emails and Facebook messages you'll probably get from this audience, but I'm sure there's some gem stories out there. So good luck to everyone in your pitching now that you know a little of the secret sauce.
Can we ask you guys, how do these people actually get in touch with you? Can we get you to give your email or preferred contact information? That would be wonderful. So take notes, guys. Right. Angeli.
I was gonna say you could probably just Google me, but I'll just reach out on Twitter first, and then we can go from there through DMs. So because my handle is the easiest to spell out, it's at ANJKHEM. Anjkem.
Mine's really hard. At Wayne Cabot.
I'm at Elise Toribio, and you can also tweet at North Jersey. I'll see both all day long.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. It's just been unbelievable and really invaluable information for business owners to get their stories covered and their information covered on such top publications. Thank you so much for joining us. It was an honor. Thank you. Thank you, Sandra.